Hi, it's Linda Adler-Kastner, Program Chair for 4Cs 2016. And we're going to do another interview now with one of the organizers and activists facilitating one of the Taking Action workshops at 4Cs 2016. This interview is with Jenna Fournel, who works for the National Council of Teachers of English, who's going to help facilitate the workshop on framing messages. So welcome, Jenna.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Terrific, thank you. So I'm going to work through a series of questions with Jenna. So first, tell us about you. What brought you to this work and what makes you so passionate about it?
Sure. So I work with NCTE. I'm responsible for our strategic communications at the organization. And I think I've come to this work of thinking about organizing and change and working with others to achieve change pretty much since the beginning. I'm a big sister, so that's something that kind of came naturally in my home, but also I remember as a kid organizing all of the kids in our neighborhood to create a Save the Earth Club. And that was kind of the beginning of seeing what was possible when you brought a lot of people together around something that you were passionate about. My background is in education, and as I went through high school and college and then became a high school English teacher, my interest in thinking about ways to create change came full force right next to my passion about using language and words. And I started out as a high school English teacher in a really poor rural school district. And when I started teaching my students there and noticed this powerful relationship between equity and literacy, that's when all of these pieces kind of came together for me. And since then have worked always in the field of education, but for the last decade plus, been working directly with teachers and here with this organization of teachers to think about how we create change through our communications.
Terrific. Tell us a story about a successful organizing or facilitating effort that you've been involved with. What made it really successful?
Sure. This is not something that would probably traditionally be labeled under the category of organizing, but I'll tell you about a program that I worked with for several years that was called the Inspired Teaching Institute. And it was a program every summer where we brought together a group of between 20 and 30 educators that spanned, in many instances, from kindergarten through high school. And we spent the summer talking about how to rethink our role in the classroom as teachers. And in general, what we were trying to do was think differently about how teachers taught their students. So to think about the idea of teaching students how to think as opposed to just teaching them what to think. And we worked primarily with public school teachers. And what was striking to me about this program was that even though that was our belief and our goals in working with them was getting them to shift their thinking about their role, it was never something that we stated explicitly. It wasn't something we beat people over the head with. It was something that we, through very carefully designed activities and engagements and conversations, wanted teachers to arrive at on their own. And what was amazing is that in the many years that I did this program, I probably worked with close to 300 teachers over time. And I would say that to this day, they are the most powerful teachers that I have ever worked with and still have a big impact on me and still are having a huge impact in their classrooms. And they were brave and they tried to do things when they went back to their schools that ran very contrary to what was happening in their schools at the time. But they did it because it was something that came from them. And so I think the big thing that I learned through that program and the reason why it was successful was because in the end, the change came through their own actions and their own ideas. And I learned a lot about what it means to take yourself and your own ego out of working with others to create change, that it wasn't about we always felt like we had run a successful program. We'd work with the teachers over the course of the year. And we always felt really proud of what had happened during that year if in the evaluations the teachers said, the facilitators were great and they were supportive, but we really did all the work ourselves. And that was doing that work was a big turning point for me because it really shifted my thinking about what it means to work in collaboration with other people and what it means to be the person on the side as opposed the person in the center, that I'm not the one who's leading this change. I'm the one that's figuring out how to put the tools in the hands of the people who are going to lead the change.
Terrific. Thank you. You've talked a little bit about this already, but what principles lead you to be an effective organizer? And what principles do you think that folks need to develop or remember in order for them to be effective?
I think learning to listen and observe and be a careful student of the context and the people that you're around. Those are really critical skills. And again, for me, it's been a learning curve to arrive at that understanding, because I think a lot of times when I'm passionate about an issue, I want to go in there asserting everything that I know and how smart and knowledgeable I am about this thing and why you're wrong and I'm right and I need to tell you how to think differently. But what I've learned over the past several years, and that I'm excited about sharing and working with others to exercise, is this idea that you have to get to know the people that you're working with and know the context that you're working in, and then be really strategic and thoughtful about how you communicate those ideas. And so that's something I've been working a lot with recently, and it's what I'm hoping to work with folks at SEAS about, is this whole idea that we create change when we are able to get the people whose minds we need to change to see and understand the problems and the solutions behind an issue in complex ways. And that's a hard thing to do, particularly if we're practitioners who know the language and who know the issues intimately, to figure out how to translate our deep knowledge into something that is digestible and understandable by others who may only have sort of a surface knowledge of an issue. That's a real skill. And my colleague here, Darren Cambridge, introduced me to a phrase yesterday that I've really just been thinking constantly about, which is this idea of taking literate action. He just kind of, I don't know if that's actually a phrase from somewhere, or he just threw it out in the conversation yesterday, but it made me really think about this idea that there are particular sort of literacies unique to different disciplines, and it made me think about how in the world of taking action, that's also kind of its own literacy. It's its own way of understanding how change happens, and that perhaps that has also changed and evolved. Because I grew up with a father who was active in protests in Berkeley in the late 1960s, and so my whole childhood was sort of filled with this romantic notion of what it meant to take action on an issue. And I've really evolved in my thinking to understand that protests have their place, but that a lot of times when change actually happens, it's a quieter kind of change, and it comes from relationships with other people and being really thoughtful about every word that we say and how we put our words together and how we use them and where we use them. And that's not I've had to adjust my thinking around the idea that that's not as exciting as what I thought the skills of a change maker were on the surface, but intellectually, it's actually something that I've gotten really excited about, because I like learning how to mold language to create that kind of change, and that's what I'm hoping to do, I guess, in the spring of next year.
Great. That's a terrific lead into the next question. Is with the workshop that you're going to facilitate, what can folks expect?
We're going to dive deep into some of what I was talking about there. This idea that an essential ingredient in creating change in an issue is ensuring the public you're trying to persuade actually understands the underlying problem and its solution. So to do that, we're going to take a closer look at language and how the way we frame our stories, our recommendations, our communications, all require strategic thinking about tone and word choice and using values and metaphors to build our case. And these are things that I know the folks who go to SEAS are already very familiar with. I mean, this is a group that does everything to do with thinking carefully about language. But what I'm really hoping to share is the ways in which people are now combining current research on how knowledge of public perceptions, particularly around educational issues, can inform the design of our communications materials. And so looking at some of the work that's been done by the Frameworks Institute, particularly, we can look at a number of different issues, but the area of their work I'm most familiar with has to do with education, and looking at how they've taken all sorts of different facets of education and done deep research into what public perception is around issues like assessment or inquiry-based teaching or how education systems work. And they've done a lot of research into what public opinions and understandings are around those issues, and they tend not to be very deep or very thorough. And then looked at what are some effective strategies and tools that we can use to actually deepen people's understanding. So in the session that I'll be working with, I'm hoping that we'll not only look a little bit at that research and think about sort of this, this theoretical framework around how to frame our arguments, but then also I'm going to invite people to bring samples of communications that either they've created or maybe they've seen others create around issues that they're concerned about, and we'll take a look at those and look at the framing that exists within those documents and the ways we might change the framing using some of these principles that we're learning about to increase the effectiveness of those materials as tools for communicating.
That's great. And that actually leads into the next question, which is what do you want folks to think about in advance or bring with them? So you said you might like them to bring with them some messages that already exist around an issue that they're interested in or care about.
Sure, yeah, and I in looking at the video that you've created to kind of explain what these taking action workshops are going to be about, you talked about a question that you're getting from a lot of people, which says, you know, we have all sorts of issues that go that are not necessarily all the same, and so I would say, come one, come all, bring whatever your issue happens to be. We can use these tools to look at anything. I would invite that as a challenge. If there's something you think won't fit, let's see what happens. And I'd invite people to bring materials, again, that they've created or that others have created, and they can be all sorts of materials. They can be flyers, they can be blogs, they can be videos, they can be audio recordings, you name it. And we'll look at those and then using those tools kind of think through what are the messages that are getting communicated here, how do these messages resonate based on what we know the public might think about an issue like this, and what kinds of tweaks could we make to this that would deepen the public's understanding of the actual issue, its problems and its solutions, and that would also move the conversation forward.
Terrific. Is there anything else that folks should know before they come or as they prepare to come to this workshop?
I think just that I'm really excited to do this. I'm excited to meet with everybody, but it's also possible if people are curious, they can go online and do some research and check out the Frameworks Institute actually has all sorts of free materials that outline this extensive research that they do on these different issues. And there are some other resources that I'm hoping to bring into the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.